Wublins are very beloved monsters by the My Singing Monsters community. It's no wonder that this island is the most listened to of all in the game. This island has a different mechanic from the others because here you need to create monsters on other islands and place them in the inventory of each Wublin, completing the necessary monsters before time runs out. So today we're going to look at the activation list of the Wublins, from the easiest to activate to the hardest Wublin to have on your island to help you complete this island, which can be difficult for some people. Keep in mind, I'll make this list from easiest to hardest, but I will also divide it into 3 parts. The easiest Wublins, those that are really simple to activate, the medium difficulty Wublins, those that have some difficulty but aren't too hard, and of course the hardest Wublins, which can be tricky if you don't put in enough effort to activate them. So let's start our list with the Wublin that for me is the easiest to activate in all of my singing monsters, and I'm talking about Brump. Yes folks, this Wublin is simply the easiest of them all to activate because it only requires 2 different monsters, Furcorn and Fog, both of which are very easy to get. You have 2 days to activate this monster, but even so, making 6 Furcorns and 2 Fogs is really easy, so I consider it the easiest. In second place, I'll put the best Wublin to farm in the game, the Zinth. Many people might place it as the easiest, but I really don't think so. However, this doesn't take away from the fact that it's the second easiest, as it only requires some fairly easy to get monsters. You have 3 days to activate it, and the hardest monster to get is the Kongle, which is really easy to acquire, so activating this Wublin won't be a problem. In third place, we have Screamoo. I consider it the third easiest because it only requires a small number of monsters, even though it asks for 6 sponges and needs the water island. It's still quite easy to activate as you have 5 days to get these monsters, and using the cold and water islands, you can easily do it. In fourth place, I'll place one of my favorite Wublins, Poyuk. Poyuk is quite easy to obtain, just like the last ones. It doesn't require many complicated monsters, mostly asking for 1 of each. You have 5 days to complete everything, and if you're already somewhat advanced with all the natural islands, this one is really easy. In fifth place, I'll put Dermot. Dermot is a Wublin that is fairly easy to activate, requiring only a few monsters, with the most difficult being the quads. But with 3 days, it gets a little complicated. However, if you plan ahead, you can activate this Wublin without any problems by making some quads beforehand. It becomes quite easy. In sixth place, I'll place Scargo. Scargo might even be easier than Dermot depending on what you find more difficult. I've placed it ahead of Dermot because Scargo doesn't require any monsters that take only 30 minutes to complete, so I can call it slightly harder. But in my opinion, both are similarly difficult. If you prepare with the quads, it becomes quite easy to activate, and it's also just 3 days. In seventh place, I'll leave Blipsqueak. This Wublin ties with the last 2 with a similar level of difficulty. It has 5 days to activate and asks for a reasonable number of monsters. The 4 Djs are probably the most work, but aside from that, it's easy just like the other 2. Now moving on to the second part of our list, the Wublins with medium difficulty to activate. These aren't too difficult, but they do require a bit more effort. In 8th place, I'll put Giegor. Giegor is a medium difficulty Wublin in terms of activation. You have 7 days to complete it, with its biggest challenge being the 6 rifts. The other monsters will be less of an issue, so if you prepare with the quads, you shouldn't have many problems. In 9th place, we have Thwok. Unlike the last Wublins we saw, Thwok doesn't require many identical quads, but rather 1 of each natural quad and several other monsters with 3 and 2 elements. So, if you don't have the ability to make a specific quad, it might be difficult for you. But overall, with good planning, it can even become easy. A tip I'll give is to make all 5 quads before placing the first monster. That way, you'll have 7 days to make the rest. In 10th place is the monster that's in the middle of our list, dividing the 9 easiest from the 9 hardest, Fleechworm. It's not very different from the ones we've seen, with an okay inventory and no major difficulties. The 5-day time limit might be tight if you don't plan ahead, so be careful not to place monsters in your inventory before properly preparing. In 11th place, we have Waji. Waji is the Wublin that requires the most quads of a single monster so far, with 7 Djs. You have 10 days to activate it, and I haven't placed it higher because the quad it needs is fairly easy to get as it comes from one of the first natural islands. The other monsters are also easy to get, and using the air and cold islands you can manage. If you have the water island to help, it gets even easier. In 12th place we have Zuka. This Wublin is quite medium in terms of difficulty, having 10 days to activate it. I honestly find it neutral. Even the time you have to activate it is one of the best. Looking at its inventory, it's a pretty easy Wublin overall. Now, in the final part of our video, we'll look at the hardest Wublins to activate, the ones that, in my opinion, are the most challenging and require the most preparation to activate. In 13th place, we have Maulch, a Wublin you have 7 days to activate. It can be complicated due to the number of 3-element monsters that come from the islands of your quads, but with good preparation you can manage. In 14th place, Astropod makes things more difficult. You have 10 days to complete its inventory, which is similar to Mulch's, but it requires more eggs, so get ready to make a lot of 3-element monsters in addition to the quads. In 15th place, we have Crepuscule, which has an inventory almost identical to Astropod's. However, it asks for more monsters in its inventory, and you only have 7 days to complete it, which makes it harder. This is why it's ranked higher, because of the limited time you have to gather all the monsters. In 16th place is Bon Appetit, my favorite Wublin. It is in this position because it's truly a complicated monster to get. In 10 days, you must complete its inventory, which contains a large number of monsters. Some are quick to make, but the sheer number is substantial. It's like Crepuscule, but with an added challenge. In 17th place, we have Pixolotl. With the most time so far, 14 days to complete its inventory, it requires a large number of monsters, mostly Cybops, which might give you a headache because you need so many. Add in the quads and triples, and it earns its place as one of the hardest to get, coming in 3rd place. In 18th place is Timpa, the second hardest Wublin to obtain in the game. It requires an enormous amount of monsters. While there are few species, the quantity of each one is huge. You need 8 quads and over 30 triples, all within the same 14 days as Pixolotl. This makes Timpa significantly harder than Pixolotl to obtain, and you'll need a lot of patience to get 24 Drumplers. And finally, in 19th place, the hardest of them all, we have Doomroll. This is the Wublin that I consider the hardest to activate in the entire game. It has the largest inventory on the island, asking for nearly all natural monsters. You will have a long and challenging journey to activate it. Of course, if you're at a very advanced level, you might find it easy, but for beginners and intermediates, activating this Wublin is very difficult. Doing all this in 14 days is quite complicated, so if you want to activate it, you'll need a solid plan and a lot of good luck. This is my list, guys. Feel free to share your lists in the comments. If I've said something you disagree with, just comment on the video, but of course, always with respect, as this video is meant to help beginners complete this amazing island. But that's it for the video, and I'll see you next time.